Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. Today, I'm going to be talking about Ike and Corabeth Godsey. If you're enjoying these videos, please do like and subscribe and feel free to share them with anyone else you think might enjoy them. The character of Ike Godsey was introduced in our pilot, The Homecoming. In that TV movie, he was played by Woodrow Parfrey. And then when we went on to do the series, of course, Joe Conley took over the role of Ike Godsey and played him brilliantly for all 9 seasons and our TV movie specials. The character of Corabeth Godsey was not introduced until season 3 in the episode The Matchmaker. And of course, Corabeth was played just enchantingly by Ronnie Claire Edwards. In The Matchmaker, a cousin of the Waltons, Corabeth Walton, comes to stay on Waltons Mountain. She is on her way to Richmond, or so she says, but like a number of Walton relatives who show up for supposedly a short period of time, she stays. The Waltons were very generous and warm-hearted about inviting relatives in and making them feel at home, but it was very challenging when they overstayed their welcome with a house full of 11 people already. And of course, John Boy always had to give up his room. So he was always sort of put out at that point. In this case, Ike is thoroughly smitten by Corabeth. And we have an opportunity to see a different side of Ike. We see the man who's sensitive and lonely and has different aspirations for his life, and we see a whole different dimension of him. And for Corabeth, she puts on airs, which was one of the fun things about that character, which Ronnie Claire brought to life so fabulously. And, being from Doe Hill, and she has this sense of herself as being much more refined, and she speaks a little French, and she appreciates dance and cultural things that Ike just doesn't relate to at all. But he does care for Corabeth very much. And I always thought it was so beautiful in episodes where we got to see that personal side of them, and when they actually did really connect as characters, and we saw the great affection and love that they did have for each other, despite being so different on the surface. In the episode The Matchmaker, Ike is at a loss how to court Corabeth. He asks John Boy to assist him in a sort of a Cyrano de Bergerac sort of way. He wants John Boy to write him lines, basically give him things to say to Corabeth that will impress her. And John Boy doesn't really want to have anything to do with it, but he gives Ike a few tips, which at first Corabeth seems interested in, but then doesn't quite know what to do with. And Ike doesn't know how to follow up with it because they're not his words. So he doesn't know what to say next. He just needed to find how to be genuine himself and show Corabeth who he really is. And ultimately she responds to that. I love the moment when Corabeth and Ike have been on the Walton front porch after dinner, and Corabeth comes in, passing through, crying, and says, "Mr. Godsey asked me to marry him."
And I said yes!
I mean, it's just such a brilliant contrast between a marriage proposal and her emotional state about it. I loved the relationship of Olivia and Corabeth in this episode, how compassionate Olivia is with her, how she tries to give her a different perspective on Ike and on marriage, how Corabeth states that she really would love to have a marriage like John and Olivia's, and yet realizes that that may not be something that she ever has the opportunity for. But ultimately she comes to recognize and appreciate what Ike has to offer and what that life would have to offer for her. I love at the actual wedding ceremony when Corabeth is preparing and she is gathering up something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. And Grandma offers up a blue garter from her wedding. And Mary Ellen, just snorts, laughs, and rolls her eyes because the idea of Grandma with a blue garter is just a little more than she can picture in that moment. In real life, Joe was less like Ike than Ronnie Claire was like Corabeth, which is kind of odd. Joe in real life was also a real estate broker, and throughout the course of the Waltons, he still operated as a real estate agent and broker. Fortunately, he had offices with staffs that could run, and because he didn't work every day on the Waltons, he was still able to combine those two activities in his life. He and Eric Scott were very close. There were storylines with Ike and Ben, namely when they put together a little song and dance troupe, which we saw in one episode. And then we heard Ike Joe sing from time to time. He had a beautiful voice, a trained voice. In the quilting, he sang with some of the other members of the male community while they're having a little pool tournament while Mary Ellen's having her quilting. So I always loved when Joe sang because he did have such a lovely voice. And it was fun when he and Eric created the little song and dance troupe that they then went out and performed at state fairs and different things like that. Eric stayed close with Joe throughout his life, and we as a cast were also close with Joe and his wife. Joe would get together with Eric regularly right up until his passing. So I was really happy to see that those relationships continued. Ronnie Claire was like Corabeth in that she was larger than life. She had a dramatic flair. And because she was from the South, that was not a put-on accent. She really did talk like that. And although she was not as unaware as Corabeth was about how the effect she was creating, Ronnie Claire knew exactly what she was doing. And so it was put on for effect, but in a more natural way. She knew exactly what she was doing. One incident that happened in my life that was typical of Ronnie Claire, it's a long story that I won't go into at this point, but I had in my life an extortion attempt and a bomb threat. It's all fine. Obviously, I'm here. But there was a period of about a 12-hour period where a lot of things happened. The police were involved, bomb sniffing dog. And the next morning I was flying out to do a publicity event in Indiana. So I had an early flight. It all resolved in the early hours of the morning. Everything was fine, but I had to get to the airport and I knew that this was something that was going to hit the press. So I called my mom on the way to the airport to let her know, look, you're going to hear this. You're not going to be able to reach me. I'm going to be on an airplane, but everything's fine. When I came back from that trip and went into work the next week, and it had hit UPI and Associated Press, and Ronnie Claire, in typical fashion, was like, well, some people will do anything for publicity. It cracked me up, as it was meant to. So I always loved that about Ronnie Claire. She always had these wonderful parties with all these eclectic, eccentric sort of people. And they were always fascinating to see this collection of people. That, to me, epitomized old school Hollywood parties. Just the personalities that were there. I always really enjoyed Ronnie Claire's parties. She moved back to Texas in her later years, bought some sort of a church, I believe it was, and renovated it into where she lived. That was her home, which I thought was, again, eccentric in the way that Ronnie Claire was. She wrote theater productions and things like that. And just was always involved in aspects of the art throughout her life. She also wrote a book that I believe was titled or subtitled, Ike Asked Me to Marry Him and I Said Yes. I have not read it. I'm sure it's tremendous fun. So if you've read it, make some comments here and let other people know what it's about and maybe if you know where they can find it. I thoroughly enjoyed working with Joe and Ronnie Claire. I adored the characters of Ike and Corabeth. I thought they brought a lot of humor to the community, to the show. They were fully realized dimensional characters. Things happened to them. Ike had a heart attack. Ronnie Claire, Corabeth, had a drinking problem. She tried all sorts of things to enhance her life and their life and make Waltons Mountain into a cultural mecca that she craved in her life. So a lot of wonderful things came about because of those two characters on the show. So thank you for asking about them. I'm glad you have embraced them in the same way that we did. I hope you enjoyed this little sneak peek into Joe and Ronnie Claire, Ike and Corabeth Godsey. And I hope you'll join me again next time for more behind the scenes of the Waltons. Thanks for watching.